on that.
Okay.
Another misnomer, and we talk about a lot, is guaranteed funerals. A lot of clients will say to the insurance agent, well, the funeral home will guarantee my funeral. I know that that's not true. There's 3 parts of a funeral that families pay for, and one of them is you pay the funeral home their charge. You pay for merchandise like a casket, a vault, and then cash advanced items. Those are like your cemetery opening and closing and death certificates, obituaries, the clergy. Those are never guaranteed. So you're basically giving the funeral home money for items that aren't guaranteed. They make the interest in that account may only grow at 1%.
So that would be kind of the service end of the, not the merchandise, but more the service end of things that they would do.
That would be third-party items that they have to purchase.
Okay.
And since the funeral home doesn't control the cost, they don't guarantee them. And it's funny, families don't normally find that out until someone dies, and the funeral home says, well, your cash advanced items, you owe more money because they did not make enough money in our account. And that's turned a lot of people off. With our trust, people don't worry about that. They only spend the money that's in the trust, and they spend it how they see fit.
And the funeral home doesn't know what's in there either.
Absolutely
because, again, that's a separate trust. And you always made the comment at some of our webinars in the past, is that you wouldn't pay a doctor up front to manage your trust funds in case you go to the doctor sometime. And
I always say this is an investment, and people don't have to think about it like that. Instead of investing with a financial planner or someone who controls, who knows how to invest, you're investing with a funeral director, and you're hoping he picks the right place to put the money. But then he keeps all the interest, the funeral home, and at the end you still could owe money. And that just doesn't work.
And now, have there been cases, Darren, where a funeral home is still putting the money in a bank account, and again they're managing, so there's no regulation, but I thought I read somewhere where a funeral director actually put the money of the funds into the stock market, ended up losing 50%.
Yeah.
And the people were short on their funerals.
That's correct. And he took all the money, put it in there, lost because of the stock market. And then when it came time for the family to do the burial, he told them you were short money because that cash advanced item is not guaranteed. And he said they lost all that money. Family had to come up with a lot of money. And our way we do it here, this funeral trust, we avoid all that.
Right.
I have people always say, well, what happens if funeral costs go up? And with the funeral trust, and I said, well, you're making interest, and then even more importantly, when you die, you're controlling the spending.
Right.
So you're only spending what the money's in the trust.
Right.
And so it doesn't matter how high the funeral goes up in price because you're not stuck on a certain casket or a certain vault or certain services. Mm-hmm. You can maneuver it around the way you like.
So the family stays in control.
Yeah.
They know what's in the trust. The funeral home doesn't, and so they're going to get the type of burial and funeral that they really desire.
During the worst time of their life, to have that control for your family, I mean, it's priceless.
Right.
That they go in there knowing they have the set dowers. The funeral home can't, take advantage of them and make them buy certain things or have them stick to the certain items they bought years ago on their prepaid funeral plan, if they're available. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of bad comments about families who picked out a casket 10 years ago, and when their mom died, the casket's not available. So they always have to go pick another one out, which is usually higher priced, and that just shouldn't be.
Well, I got a phone call last night, Darren, an interesting one, and probably perfect timing for this, is my sister lost her father-in-law, and she called me last night at home and said, we spent 3 hours at the funeral home, and she said, I've never been through such an experience in my life because they had gone down and picked out all the services, the merchandise ahead of time, didn't pay for all of it, put a partial down payment on it. And she got down there, and she said the most used word that was used by the funeral director was upgrade, upgrade. Yeah. They wanted to upgrade him into a nicer casket. They wanted them, instead of spending $125 in flowers, $525. The casket that they had picked out, like you said, wasn't available. Mm-hmm. And so what were they substituting with? They wanted to upgrade it to a higher price one.
Right.
And she said, we spent 3 hours there, and she said, I felt like I spent 3 hours with a used car salesman when the funeral director was sitting down with them, because they was just upgrade, upgrade, and upgrade. And it was a modest planned funeral. And so I'm sure that the funeral director had some incentives to try to upgrade the
Absolutely. When you go to mortuary school and you go to work for a funeral, they teach you how to sell. And it is a big sell. And now you're not only selling, but you're selling to people who are emotional, who are tired. They may have been up all night because someone died. We know that when they come in.
Right.
And it's like an interrogation. If you interrogate someone long enough, they're just going to finally just go along with what you say, or, you know, and when someone dies and all those decisions have to be made, it's a horrible time for families, and funeral directors can exploit that. Do they all? No, but a lot of them do. Because funeral profits are down, and they want to make sure they get as much as they can out of each customer.
Right.
And with the funeral trust, and with us, and how we can help families, it's a wonderful opportunity to provide that protection that is lacking right now.
Right. And I think what I hear you saying too, Darren, as a funeral director, is the way we're setting up the funeral trust. Number one, we're putting into insurance companies that are highly respected, they're regulated, and we know the money's going to be there regardless if the funeral home is there or not.
Correct.
Because a lot of times people can place money with the funeral home, and by the time they pass away, it's not even the same funeral home.
Right.
And you don't know if they're going to have to pay more or not. And this way they can really have control of how they spend their money, which whatever funeral home the family chooses.
Absolutely. And that's the biggest thing. Safety of the money, that the family controls it, portable to any funeral home, and flexible. You're not stuck on certain spending. You can go in there and buy what you want at the time you need with your funeral budget, as I always say.
Right.
That's how you buy a funeral, with a lump sum of money, with a budget.
Let's talk about the last two things today. And again, it's been a privilege having you here. And again, you'll be on our website. But I have agents that will call me around the country and ask, what's the average price for, let's say, a cremation type funeral service compared to a traditional?
Well, they always say the national average for a funeral is about $8,700. As a funeral director in Chicago, I laugh because average in Chicago is probably $10,000 when you throw in a full burial, full funeral. A cremation does bring the price down a little bit because you're not buying a grave and opening the grave and closing. You're saving on the disposition part. So depending on where you live, funerals can, a cremation only can range $3,000 to $4,000, and you can go all the way up to $15,000, $20,000 easily.
With a cremation?
Easily. Easily. In fact, one of your clients said that the funeral home tried to make them buy a casket for $10,000 for a cremation, and I advised them that that's not true, and gave them their other options.
Yeah, so, see, we've had agents call and say, well, a cremation only should cost $2,000, but they're talking about the disposition. But
that's all it is.
You got services on top of that. You've got flowers.
You still have a full
newspaper.
Funeral.
Yeah, so you still do that. So to do a funeral trust with, let's say, $8,000 for a cremation isn't really that much out of line, is it?
It is not. When you throw in the funeral home charges for a cremation, if people want to have a service at a church, you're going to pay for the church, the organist, the soloist. Newspaper notices like the Chicago Tribune could be that I deal with $400 or $500. So that can add up nicely. So that's when I do cremations. That is not an unrealistic number to put in there.
Now, traditional ones, we can write to funeral trusts anywhere from $1,000 to $15,000 today. Is $15,000 that much out of line for a traditional?
Absolutely not. No. When you throw in the funeral home service charge, merchandise, casket vault, all your cash advanced items, lunch, you might pay for lunch. The marker and the setting fee for the marker, it can easily be $15,000.
Okay, so
absolutely.
So that $15,000 range for traditional is very within reason.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And with the cremation, if we did $8,000, it's not much out of line either, is it?
No, because there's a lot more than just that disposition and cremation.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Well, Darren, I'd like to thank you for coming into the studio today and be with us. And again, it's nice to have you here. With a new program we'll be setting up shortly, some of the agents will have direct access to even calling you and ask questions in the future.
Absolutely. So it's about protecting the families, and I'm so glad that I found you, because this product, to me, after all my investigations, found that this is the best product for people when it comes to making sure there's funds available.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Darren, thank you for coming in.
Thanks
We appreciate it.
Thank you.